Well, listeners, today we're taking you on a journey that we've only explored once before on the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, and that is the quest to catch the mighty tripletail. Now, in Australia, the tripletail is probably not going to be right near the top of the list when you're talking about sports fish. That's definitely not the case in the US and in other parts of the world where the tripletail are a very popular fishing target, perhaps a little bit more reliable in where you can find them than they are in Australia. And I guess we're lucky in Australia we have so many species to target, although Florida, where tripletail fishing is popular, I guess they have lots of species there as well. So I'm not sure why it is that tripletail are perhaps less targeted in Australia than they are in some other countries, but nonetheless, they are here and there's a hardy band of anglers who go out chasing this species and get very obsessed. Many of them chase no other species. They get so focused on tripletail. And I'll tell you a little bit about why that is during the course of this interview. Anyway, most Australians haven't seen, let alone caught tripletail, despite them being reasonably common around our coast. They're one of those species that unless you're looking for them, unless you know what to look for, you probably won't see them. And the vast majority of anglers go straight past them on the way to their regular fishing grounds. They're also a species that, by virtue of their lifestyle, don't often turn up in bycatch. Every now and then, someone will pull up a tripletail that's been caught whilst fishing for other species, and every now and then they turn up in cast nets by anglers who are gathering bait. Usually the juvenile fish, I guess, turn up in the cast nets, but even that isn't that common. And yet, as I said earlier on, this species is not uncommon. If you go looking for them, there's quite a few of them there. And as far as sporting species goes, well, tripletail fishing often is very much a visual affair. So spotting the fish, sight casting to it, fishing in clear water up near the surface, and then hard fighting fish. And for those who want to take a fish or two home, a great tasting fish evidently as well. So in many ways, the tripletail is the perfect sport fish. And yet, as I said, so few people fish for them. Anyway, I'm confident I've made my point. I don't want to labour it any further, but we are going to be talking about targeting tripletail in the Gladstone area today. This is the second episode about targeting tripletail around Gladstone. I'd love to talk to some anglers from other parts of Australia. If you know somebody or you are somebody who consistently catches tripletail on lures, would love to have a chat with you. Definitely hit me up, greg@docklures.com. Would be fabulous to have some episodes on this species from other parts of Australia. Now, on another note, today's episode is an ALF Plus episode, and many of you will know that ALF Plus episodes are reserved for my Team Dock Lures members. So there's a public version of today's episode, and then there's the Plus edition in the Team Dock Lures members area, or pushed out to the phones of my Team Dock Lures members, which contains some extra information. And what I've done today is spent some time doing a little bit of research on tripletail because it's a species that I personally haven't caught. I must admit, haven't really spent a lot of time targeting. So I thought I'd do a little bit more research, fill in a couple of blanks in the interview and put that into the Plus edition of today's episode. So if you're a Team Dock Lures member, well, you shouldn't be listening to this episode of the podcast. You should be listening to the Plus edition over on the members area or on your phone. Definitely go and do that and get the extra information. If you're not a Team Dock Lures member, you'd like to get the Plus edition of this episode and multiple other episodes as well from the past, plus audio masterclasses and live streams and a whole bunch of other tools and resources for my ALF members, then go over and check out team.docklures.com and become a member today. It'll cost you around about the same as what you'd pay for a beer at your local once a month. The big difference, of course, being that once you've drunk that beer, it's gone. But when you drink in the information that I put into the Team Dock Lures members area, that stays with you for life and improves your fishing for life. So definitely good value. Go and check it out, team.docklures.com. Now, one more thing before we launch into today's episode is that, as I said, tripletail fishing, it's very much a visual form of fishing, whether it's finding structure floating on the surface, whether it's finding fish underneath the structure, whether it's seeing where to cast your lure, whatever that may be. And visual fishing requires good quality polarized sunglasses. And the great news is that you can now support the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast by buying your polarized sunglasses through us. And not just any sunglasses, but the best, in my opinion, the best polarized fishing sunglasses you can get, and at the best price point as well. We've got price match guarantee, we've got money back satisfaction guarantee, and I'll tell you what, we also throw in a couple of packs of Pro Lure clone prawns, which are just quietly absolutely perfect for throwing at tripletail. So come and check out the sunglasses on our website. They're all Tonic brand sunglasses, the only brand that I wear. You'll find those at docklures.com/tonic. Get yourself a deal, best price, bonus products, money back guarantee, all of that's available over at docklures.com tonic. Make sure you get some of those on your face before you go out chasing tripletail. Okay, well, I've definitely been rambling for long enough. So now, folks, let's get into today's episode of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast.
This is the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, where our mission is to help everyday sports fishers experience extraordinary lure fishing. If next level fishing is your dream, then let us provide the tools and information that will bring that dream to life. Tune in as our expert hosts chat with Australia's best anglers and share their tips for success. Then check out our website. It's one of Australia's largest and most popular online fishing resources. But right now, settle in to listen as ALF founder Greg Doc Lures Vinyl delivers today's episode through the nerdy lens of a scientist, lure maker, and sport fishing tragic.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. And I tell you what, I am absolutely pumped for this episode. It's a species that we're going to be covering today that I've only spoken to one other person about, but today we're going to double the number of episodes I've published on the mighty tripletail. And to help us out today, Gladstone local and repeat ALF podcast guest, Ryan Stimson. So Ryan, welcome back to the show, mate.
Cheers, Greg. How you going, mate?
Going really well, mate. And, you know, I last spoke to you about fishing for grunter around the Gladstone area, and that was a great chat, mate. But I believe that you've basically stopped fishing for anything else, and now you're just completely focused for the last 2.5 years or so just on the triples.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, no, don't have a great deal of time to chase all the other species when I'm chasing triples. So, yeah, I just focus on them nowadays, mate.
Fantastic, fantastic. So just the kind of guy we need to feed us some tips, because I'll tell you something, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's probably a lot more tripletail out there around Northern Australia than what people realise. People don't look for them, so they don't see them. They don't know how to fish for them, so they don't catch them. But, you know, if you open your eyes and you start specifically searching for and targeting this species, they're all over the place. Am I right?
Yeah, mate, yeah. But, yeah, once you sort of find what you're looking for and general areas, yeah, you'll start noticing and then popping up everywhere.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear. And we're going to, you know, pick your brains to find out what those general areas are and where to start looking for them. And a little bit about the conditions and the tackle and obviously the lures as well. So we'll get into that in a moment, mate. But tell me what it is about tripletail. They're quite a special fish. I mean, you know, they're found right around Northern Australia. They're typically associated with floating structure, and they typically sort of float around on their sides in crazy ways, you know, feeding on all sorts of things around those structures. But what is it about triples that inspires you to go out and target them almost exclusively?
Yeah, so basically I used to like just picking a species and targeting it, and then I started getting into sight fishing and seen Dan Powell. He was a local guy, and he was catching a few, and every time I'd see one posted, I was like, oh, how good would it be to catch one of those? And obviously Powell was targeting them, so I thought, all right, well, I'm just going to dedicate a year to trying to get one, and yeah, and then ever since getting them, I just love the sight fishing aspect of it.
Yep.
You know, they're hard to find, and that's part of the thrill too, is just finding one and then getting it. But yeah, mainly just the sight fishing aspect, Greg. I love it.
Yeah. And, you know, there's so many different challenges in fishing. We've all got our own challenges, right? So, you know, some people it's all about catching as many fish as they can. Some people it's all about catching a really big fish of some particular species or a really difficult fish to catch. These ones, you know, there's a whole bunch of people out there that do fish for them, and quite often they keep it pretty quiet and keep it to themselves. But, they're a completely different challenge, aren't they? It's really about finding the fish and then having found them, getting them to take a lure.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the challenge is finding them. All right. Definitely.
And I have to admit, mate, this is a species that's still on my bucket list. I haven't caught one yet, so I have seen them a couple of times, haven't been able to tempt them, but haven't, I must say, specifically, you know, put in the time and the hours. And that's something that I would make clear to all of our listeners here today. We're going to give you some great tips, some great advice from Ryan's vast experience on catching tripletails. But there's no real shortcut. You have to get out there. You have to spend the time on the water looking for them and know where to look. And there's no getting around that. You have to put a lot of time and hours and a lot of fuel in to be able to find these fish and catch them.
Oh, yeah. That's it.
And be aware that it could become an obsession by the sounds, as it has become with Ryan. So, Ryan, let's get into this interview a little bit and start talking about how you go about finding tripletails. Now, they're found I think they've been caught as far south as the New South Wales border, even a bit further south and on the east coast, right on the top of Australia to the west and down to sort of similar latitudes. But, how do you go about finding them? Because they're not associated with reef structure or, wonky holes or some of those things where people have got an X in their GPS. They just go to X marks the spot and that's where the fish are going to be. So give us a bit of an oversight or a bit of an overview, I should say, of how you go about planning a trip and where you're going to go to find tripletail.
So basically they're associated with like floating debris and whatnot. So on current lines and things like that. So basically I had to go find like my local area, just where the current lines actually form in certain areas too, like, in your bays or along the coastline. So just find basically where your current lines, any current lines form. So that was probably the biggest thing, is working all that out first. Yep. And then
how do you, before you move on, how do you go about working that out? Is it just getting on the water looking for current lines, or are there some ways to figure out?
No, so obviously there's not a lot of info on them. So I basically just got in the boat, went to areas, just got out in the harbour and looking for seaweed and things like that. So I did big zigzags across, so like our harbour.
Okay.
So I just did big zigzags on certain parts of the tide. And I feel like current lines form in the centre of like your channels. So I basically just zigzagged across our harbour, and by zigzag I mean like I did 130 k's along the coast.
Yep.
Zigzagging along different contour lines, coming off like big flats and whatnot. So I just zigzag pattern until I found the current lines and I marked them. And then obviously on certain parts of the tide, those same current lines will form. So yeah, I just put a run in, run out tide mark on those certain current lines that formed, and then I started painting a bit of a picture on where the lines are.
And in what sort of depth of water are we talking? I mean, this sounds like it's all sort of inshore, coastal sort of fishing.
Yeah, mainly all inshore. Like I wouldn't go any further than like the 20-metre contour line along the coast. Like, yeah, it's mainly, you are looking for leaves, sticks, debris, seaweed and whatnot. Like more your other debris is like, it'll be along the coast. It'll be washing off the coastline.
Okay, yeah. Now, obviously, if you're looking for that kind of flotsam and jetsam and detritus and that sort of stuff, that's all associated with mangroves, associated with creek systems and those fringing mangroves as well. And if you're looking for current lines, well, obviously, you're not going to go too far out. Your East Australian current's sort of deeper. It doesn't create current lines so much in most places. Of course, you're up Wellington, that sort of thing in some places. So fairly shallow coastal water. Does water clarity play a part?
For finding them, like they're definitely in nice clean blue water, but also your dirty water.
Okay.
But for like actual like finding the tripletail, you'll find the triples in your dirty water will be like a sandy, whiter sort of colour.
Okay.
And then in your like clean blue water, they'll typically be like a darker, blotchy sort of colour. And then that also depends on what they're actually floating on at the time. Like if they're in a weed line, they might be dark with patchy yellow blotches on them, and they're trying to imitate that weed.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
But you're mainly just looking for anything sort of discoloured water, but they'll be in either or, like clean water, dirty water.
Okay. They don't mind as long as there's some flotsam and jetsam around.
Yep, and a lot of bait.
All right. So you may have just answered the next question with that one sentence, but once you've found your current lines, once you've identified, well, here's a place where there's lots of mangrove leaves and sticks and twigs and seeds and all that kind of stuff floating around on the surface, and maybe a little bit of foam or whatever, a bit of a surface disturbance to show you that the water's actually moving there. What's the next thing you do, mate? Are the fish kind of just dispersed along that current line, or are they more associated with particular types of flotsam and jetsam that might be in the current?
Yeah, so basically, like once I'm on a current line, I'll cruise along and then I'll sort of look for like a bit of white foam. That stands out more so than sticks, leaves, weed. Like you'll see foam from a distance before you'll see the rest of it.
Yep.
And then so basically once I sort of see that, I'm like, all right, there might be debris in that line. And then once I start to see sticks and whatnot, I'll stick out about 10 metres or 10 to 12 metres from that line. And if it's looking likely, so I'm seeing heaps of weed, heaps of sticks, or a heap of bait even, I'll put my electric motor in, and then I'll just sort of coast along that line nice and slow with my rod in hand, and then I'm basically looking for any sort of movement. You might see them like lick, or you might see just a bit of discoloured weed underneath, like it might look like a bit of weed or something discoloured under a bit of weed, and you go, all right, that's possibly a triple. But yeah, mainly that debris and that will slow me up, and then I'll just coast along that line.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. And how sensitive are these fish to noise? I mean, I'm assuming you're not going to go roaring up there on the main donk. You know, you said you come up within 10 or 12 metres of the Flotsam Jetsam and you whack your electric in and start working your way along it. But you'd approach it fairly quietly, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah. So some days it depends. Like if it's quite overcast, it'll slow me up a lot. But some days if I'm just trying to cover ground, I will be up on the plane. And now I know likely areas, not so much. But when I was first starting, I was trying to cover as much ground as I could. So I would just go that 10 metres out from that line and I would just get on the plane and go along it. And often I'd spook them.
Okay.
But I sort of knew that I could turn back and they'll be on the next they'll be on the next bit of structure or they'll hide right up under whatever they're on and they will come back up and resurface. So
Okay. Cool. And I mean, there's something to be said for that. I know people who do the same thing. You know, even in barra impoundments, for example, where if they've got a few days that they're going to be fishing, they'll go into some of the bays in the impoundment with the main donk deliberately to spook fish because they know those fish will return when it goes quiet and they'll come back the next day. And it's just a way of finding fish. So I fully understand what you're saying there. Now, when you spot fish, you said that, you know, often you're just looking for some kind of movement or a flick on the surface. These are quite large fish. So how obvious are they? I mean, are they easy to see once you're looking for them or do they take a bit of, you know, sort of becoming accustomed to?
Yeah, sometimes they're really easy to see. You might have like what I call a floater and he might be like right on top of the water and yeah, you can't miss them. But often they'll be just under a bit of weed or something. So they're not as obvious, but it's more that I'll be slowing down in those areas that look likely. So I'm really looking under things and whatnot. So they can be real obvious or they can be not obvious at all.
So if you find a likely piece of structure, worth putting in a few blind casts even if you can't see a fish?
Yeah, certain sticks and logs. As you can imagine, there's probably a lot more stick underwater. I've definitely pulled up on likely logs and whatnot, and I'll put a few casts in, dropping it down under things. And yeah, I've hooked quite a few doing that.
Yep. Okay.
So yeah, you do blind fish. Same with weed patches too, Greg. Like if you're in a line and there's a heap of weed, and then at the start of the line there might be like a really big bit of clump of weed. Also, I've blind casted under those.
Okay.
And caught fish as well.
Okay.
Finding the fish before you get there, like I said, they might be hiding underneath stuff and whatnot.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Talk us through. You mentioned logs and sticks and that kind of stuff. You mentioned weed. You know, there's all kinds of stuff turns up on the water surface, you know, in these current lines. What are the key things that you just look at and go, oh, there's just got to be a triple on that?
So if I see any big logs, that's pretty likely, especially if it's got barnacles or things like that on it.
Yep.
That gets me pretty keen. Also, just big patches of like sticks and foam and all that, like stuff that's just really clumped up in a big patch. I'll be pretty confident I'm going to find a triple on something like that. So.
Okay. Yep.
And also just man-made things like a bucket.
Yep.
I seem to like big obvious things like that. But yeah.
So decent sized clumps of weed, obviously. And it sounds like where there's lots of weed in the water, it's a bit like, almost like fishing for flathead, but upside down, if you know what I mean. Normally you fish along those weed edges in shallow water for flathead, but for triples you're fishing along the weed edges at the surface.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So the good clumps of weed and, you know, obviously where it's all lined up by a current and any kind of big hard structure, particularly if it's got lots of marine growth on it, because of course that's why they're there. They're feeding on that marine growth.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. All right, anything else we need to know about finding fish, mate? Anything with tides? I mean, obviously that depends a little bit on your location because it's going to affect your current lines, but tides, wind, time of day, time of year, anything like that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, obviously like, you want the sun out, things like that. Times and tides, I've caught them on incoming, outgoing. It's more just working out the best tides in your area that your lines are forming.
Yep.
That's the main thing with that, really.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter what the tide is or it just all it matters is that it's forming current lines.
That's right.
And accumulating debris. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Cloudy days versus sunny days. Obviously, sight fishing, you can see better on a sunny day, particularly if it's a glassed out sort of a day, but any preference there?
Yeah, I want the sun out.
Okay. Yep.
Sun out and some nice calm days. Sun out is the go. But basically you can cover more ground because I can see a lot more under things at speed where an overcast day I've definitely still caught fish, but it slows me right down and I've really got to look under things or spook them. Sometimes I'll just go past and I'll be just looking to spook one.
Yep.
From trying to cover ground on a overcast day. But yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, you want that sun out.
And the same with wind. Do you prefer a calm day for the same reason that you can see the fish more easily, or is wind not such a big deal?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You sort of want a little bit of chop, just because you can sort of see them move around a bit more. They might come up in a little bit of chop and they'll catch your eye a bit better. And on them real calm days, I've had them where they're a little bit spooky, just boat noise and whatnot.
Cool. All right. Well, I think we've covered where to find fish, or how to find fish, I guess, more more accurately, types of structure to look for and all that kind of stuff. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the tackle you use for them, mate. So run us through rod, reel, line, leader first of all, and we'll get on to lures in just a moment. Yeah,
so I just use just a light little 20-pound setup, little 2500 reel, and I run a 30 or, I don't know, it's a 25-pound Schneider leader.
Okay.
Just a mono. That's all I run, mate. Yeah.
So pretty light gear. I mean, these are, they remind me of barramundi. I know a lot of people have said, they often get confused with barramundi. Do they have the same raspy teeth as a barramundi? They don't wear through a leader as easily, or?
No, they got like saw blade sort of teeth, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so not raspy like the barras. Put it this way, I haven't been rubbed off by one.
Okay.
Yeah, it just seems to be little saw blade teeth. They don't really rub through leader, and when they hit it, they're crunching it with their teeth first, like they're not engulfing it as much.
Right, so they're not like a barrow inhales a lure quite often quite deeply, and even if you've got a 100-pound leader, sometimes they'll rub you off if they've really got that lure down deep and the line's coming through their jaw.
Yeah, very rarely, have I had one engulfed, but it definitely has happened, but haven't lost the fish through it or anything.
Okay, so fairly light gear, which is great because it's very, very pleasant to fish with. You can cast it all day. If you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where you've got things to cast at all day, that's fantastic. Walk us through the rod, mate. What sort of rod do you like?
I've just got a 7 and 14-pound Samaki Zing. Nothing too special. Just whatever type of rod you want to use to throw a light lure accurately and for a fair distance, because some of my lures, they won't be heavily weighted.
Yep.
So, just something that'll get that light stuff out.
All right, cool. In terms of their fighting ability, I mean, they're obviously, sometimes they're around floating trees and things, but quite often they're around weed and stuff and in reasonably open water. So I'd imagine you don't have to put a lot of pressure on them.
No, you can take it fairly easy with them. If you hook one, because they're up the top of the water, like if you hook one and keep their head up, you can fairly just coax them to the boat and they won't do too much. They might do a few jumps and whatnot.
Yep.
But say I hook one and he gets a little run down. Once they go down, they'll start to really, that's when you'll feel their power.
Yeah.
They'll start to bury down and you'll go, oh, all right, they've got a bit of go.
And I'd imagine, they're fairly deep-bodied fish as well. So once they get into a current, they can leverage that current to their advantage well. So a lot of power in those tails and then the current and the big flat sides. Yeah, unlike gear.
So much.
So moral of the story, when you hook a triple, try and keep the rod up, keep the head up and keep them on the surface as much as you can.
Oh, unless you want a bit of fun with them.
Yep.
But those I will say, like that size of fish, like that 35 to like 45, like you will feel them, but like 45 and up, like you get a 60 and that's on, like, they'll drag you straight up. You're not keeping their head up.
Yeah, okay. And what's a really big triple tail for you? What's your PB?
So, like, actually sight fishing them, I've gotten to over 60.
Okay.
But my biggest that I caught on a live bait, and it was blind fishing, was 73 centimetres.
Okay. Yeah, good fish.
But they're typically around that 35 to like 55 is like the typical size I'll find sight fishing them.
Okay, cool. Excellent. All right. What I'd like to do now, mate, is just have a chat about lures because you mentioned. Well, hey, folks, it's Greg Vinyl here, just interrupting this podcast episode to remind you that there is an ALF Plus edition of this interview over in the Team Doc Lures members area. And as always, the ALF Plus edition is here to give you extra information to help fill in a few more gaps and help put you on the course to catching more fish, in this case, tripletail. So what can you expect to hear? What extra information can you expect to get? Well, once I got off the interview with Ryan, I went and did some research because the tripletail is a species that I haven't caught previously. And I thought, you know what? I really should have a look at this species and get a little bit more information and try and narrow down how I'd go about catching a tripletail. Now, as Ryan has said multiple times during the interview, it's about spending time on the water. It's about burning lots of fuel. It's about keeping your eyes open and figuring out the patterns about where they turn up and what they're feeding on and when best to fish for them. But my hope is that by doing a little bit of research, figuring a few things out, we might be able to save ourselves a little bit of fuel, a little bit of time, and maybe start to figure out the tripletail just a bit quicker than if we just hit the ocean and start looking for them. So I've done some reading, I've done some research, I've spoken to a few people who catch tripletail, but unfortunately were not willing to come and talk about it. And I've gathered some information that will help you in that regard, and that's available in the ALF Plus edition of this episode. So my Team Doc Lures members are already listening to that. If you'd like to be part of Team Doc Lures, support the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, and get that extra information that can help you to find tripletail a bit faster, then go over and join up at team.doclures.com. That's team.doclures.com. That'll give you access to my private members feed, which will see you having the extended ALF Plus episodes pushed out to your phone, pushed out to your computer. So you get to enjoy the extra information, but also it will allow you to access members' resources, our tackle collective, our online fishing map, audio masterclasses, and a whole bunch of other resources that will help you to catch more fish as well. So check it out, team.doclures.com. The cost of becoming a member is less than you'll pay for a pint of beer, and whilst that beer is gone after you've drunk it, a Team Doc Lures membership will give you lifelong learning that will help you to catch fish for the rest of your life. So go and check it out, team.doclures.com. Get the extended ALF Plus edition of this podcast interview. But now, folks, let's get back to our conversation with Ryan Stimson. You know, you need gear that's going to be able to throw light lures fairly long distances at times. So walk us through those lures, mate. Maybe if you've got 3 or 4 top lures that you would recommend for us. Let's go through each of those and how to use them as well.
I love a gulp shrimp, just, you know, that fish like the taste. But yeah, so I was using, when I first started, an unweighted gulp shrimp, like a 3-inch. Colour doesn't matter too much. It does in the sense of you want to be able to see it when you cast it.
Okay.
So, but yeah, and I'll just run that with a little mustard tarpon hook coming out the bottom of the lure. And I would just cast that up and I would just wind it straight to their nose and they're going to eat it. And that, yeah, I might even just slowly drop it once it gets to them and they'll sort of follow it down.
So how close do you need to land it to them? You've got to get it in front of them, obviously not behind them or alongside them. Your casting's got to be spot on. And how close?
Yeah, so say they're moving along a line, because they will move under those bits of weed and whatnot.
Yep.
You just want to cast it up 1 metre or 2 in front of them, and you really want to just intercept them as they're moving forward. So, yeah, you just got to look up ahead, cast. They're not too spooky with, like, lure noise and whatnot if you're a little bit out. And, yeah, you just want to wind it, just a steady wind. There's no twitching or anything like that. It's just a steady wind straight at their nose. With the prawns and whatnot, yeah, I just want to put it straight towards their nose and make sure they can see it, and they should hit it. They're pretty aggressive when they're up in the line. So
you're really imitating a prawn that is, not spooked. It's casually swimming around, not fleeing and skipping across the surface. Okay.
Yep. But yeah, the tip too is like, well, with any sight fishing, you don't want to cast on them.
Yep.
Like you will, you know what I mean? You will spook them. And when you're trying to, in a rush and the heart's going, you can just go aim straight at it and hit it.
Yes.
So it's, looking ahead, seeing where it's sort of going and then just intercepting it.
Yeah. And that's a mistake a lot of people make with a lot of species is see a fish, cast right on top of it. It's a surefire way to spook them.
I still do it, Greg.
Oh, everyone does. Everyone does in the heat of the moment. From time to time, we're gonna lose concentration. But yeah, get it in front of them. And if it's too far in front, not a problem. You can crank it back in and put in another cast. But if you put it on top of them and spook them, well, that fish is done for at least a little while. You need to leave it and come back.
Yeah, no, they're pretty forgiving, hey?
So walk us through with the gulp shrimp. Walk us through rigging of that. You mentioned lightly weighted or unweighted, but give us sort of hook sizes and weights and how you decide what to do with them. Yeah,
so I'll just use them, just a little mustard tarpon hooks. They seem pretty good.
Oh, okay, you did say that. Yep.
Yeah, sorry. And I'll make sure they're super sharp. So anything with the triples, like, because they got that hard little mouth, I'll sharpen all my hooks the day of. And I just basically thread it through on the underside. So the hook point is on the underside of the shrimp. So it keeps it upright. But nothing too fancy with them.
Cool. And other lures, mate? That's the gulp shrimp. Are there other lures that you'd use?
Yeah, so that's the one I first started with. And then because there's often like bait, white bait through them lines, just like a diesel minnow or any sort of paddle tail around that 3 to 4 inches. The thing I like about them is they're really visible. So the prawn, obviously they'll see it when it's pretty close, but they tend to get their eyes on those bigger paddle tails a bit sooner, whether they can feel them.
Yeah, they feel the vibration, I'd say, yeah.
Yeah. Mm. And they're really, they're happy to attack them. And same thing again. It's just cast up current of them and wind it straight to their face, straight to their nose, and they'll attack it. And I have had them too, where they will follow those right to the boat, and then they might lose it, or they lose sight of it, or they balk at it a bit, and I'll pull it out of the water, and then they'll be looking for it. They'll actually, you think you've stuffed it up, but they'll actually be looking for it again. They start charging up, and then, you can just throw it again and they'll pack it again. I've had one come back like 3 or 4 times.
Cool.
Paddle tail.
Yep. And same deal with the paddle tails and weighting?
Yeah. So paddle tail, being a bit bigger lure, they've got a bit of weight in them anyway, so you should be able to cast it out.
Yeah.
I just little 1/8 or something, jig head.
Yep. Okay. And a slow, steady retrieve again?
Yeah. With the paddle tails, you're trying to get that reaction bite, so how do you say it? Like a medium barra burn.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Just that. Nothing too crazy, but fairly hooking straight at them and they just react to it.
Yeah, okay. Yep. So enough to get that tail working and really creating some vibration.
Yep. No, I don't like twitching or anything like that.
Okay.
Just all straight burn.
Yep. No worries. And colour doesn't matter again, or do you have favourites?
No, just something that's like nice and visible for yourself. If you're casting it out and you're trying to thread it through a few bits of weed, you want to be able to see where your lure actually is, and then also like how deep it is. So you want something nice and visible, but the fish itself isn't too fussy on colours.
Okay. Yep. Well, and presumably they're coming up from underneath the lure a lot, so it's silhouetted against the sky and they can't see the colour that easily anyway.
Yeah.
In those circumstances. So yeah. All right. So we've got the gulp shrimps and we've got the diesel minnows or some kind of small paddle tail. Anything else we need to have in our kit? Yeah.
So a few that I've caught and something's gone wrong and I've had to keep them. I'll often inspect what's in their stomach.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity. So I see a lot of like sargassum crabs, obviously from the weed and whatnot and on floating sticks. So yeah, that's led me to start using like a crab lure.
Okay.
And James Holt has a swim crab.
Yes. Yep.
So a lot of the other crabs, when you throw them out, they don't swim. They just sort of start spinning. So James has got it's just a small plastic crab and it's got them nice swimmy little legs that just flicker out the back. So I've been using them recently and they're probably my favourite lure now for the triples.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
That's what I'm using first.
Okay. And just walk us through how you fish with those, obviously casting in front of the fish again. What do you do once that lure's hit the water?
Yep, so same thing, because they have the actual the swimming, like moving leg, and they stay upright. James has got a little jig head comes with him, and it's got that little belly weight on it, so they swim perfect. So same thing again, whatever they're on, I'm obviously aiming in front of them a bit, casting it and bringing it to their nose.
Yep.
But yeah, same exact thing. Nice and slow, but they're not the biggest profile. I just like to get them right in front of their face and they love them.
Excellent. All right. So we've got 3 good lures there. Are there any more we need, mate?
Nah, that's all I'm using, hey. And I will have those all rigged up when I am fishing because depending on the day, like if there's heaps of that sargassum weed around, those crabs, they're without doubt the best thing to throw. But some days, yes, they won't be interested in a paddle tail or a gulp so you just go between them all.
Okay. So you do need to rotate through them. So have a few rods rigged up, ready to go, and put in a few casts. If it doesn't get any attention, change over to a different one. Yep.
Have your 3 rods there and then go between them. Like how I found that crab was so good was I'd thrown a paddle tail at this one and it wouldn't eat. I was like, because you can persist with them, like they will move and then you just keep sort of just trailing them and they will come back up and you get a few shots at them, but certain fish. But yeah, you wouldn't eat the paddle tail. Wouldn't eat any prawns, and I was like, I'll throw this crab on. As soon as I threw the crab on, he ate first cast.
Yep. Interesting.
So, it's cool to have a bit of a variety. You can use fly for them too, Greg.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
They love flies, and obviously having your floating line and whatnot, it's a pretty effective way of fishing for them.
So walk us through. I mean, we're obviously not a fly fishing podcast, but give us a couple of flies that you'd throw at them.
So I thought shrimp would work really well. They don't seem to work that well on them. Don't know why, but I used just a clouser.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yeah, just a little clouser, and same thing, just pulled straight to their nose. And I've had them sort of walk on that. I'm obviously not the best fly fisherman, but I've had them sort of a bit hesitant, and I've just let that clouser, it's got a little bit of weight, and I just let it drop, and they've eaten it on that drop.
Okay.
And then also just a little bait fish profile fly. That seems to work. Nothing fancy. My mate Jack Richards, he makes just a little minnow, and they work great. So
excellent. All right. Anything else we need to know about lures or techniques or anything else, mate?
No, not really, mate. Not that I can think of.
All right. So let's bring this interview to a close, mate, with a little bit of a discussion about some of the things that you might find in the stomach of a triple tail. Because we had a bit of a chat before I hit the record button, and you mentioned that, occasionally you get a fish that's hooked a bit deep or whatever, and you're going to knock it on the head and take it home, and so you do open the stomach up, and you mentioned you see the crabs in there a fair bit, but just walk us through some of the other things that turn up in the stomach contents of a tripletail.
Yeah, so we're actually on a trip up Stanage Bay, and I'll use the same area, same techniques for finding them up there. And we're actually cruising back to a mothership, and we come across one, and I got it, and it was hooked a bit deep, so we kept it. And we're actually cutting it open on the board to see what was in its stomach, and it was full of baby seahorses, and I mean like 20 little baby seahorses. So
wow.
That was probably the coolest one. We're all like pretty shocked.
Yep. But I mean, those, the types of debris that you're talking about, particularly the bigger logs that have got barnacles and stuff on them, they get covered in all kinds of, sort of marine creatures. Yeah. So, I mean, prawns and crabs are obviously among them, and small bait fish. Seahorses is one I wouldn't have thought of, but why not? I mean, they've obviously got some nutritional value if you're a tripletail.
Yeah, no, it's pretty bloody random.
Yeah.
Oh. And also, on a recent one, their mate Jack caught a triple and cut it open, and he found a baby turtle skull inside his gut. So that was pretty cool.
So clearly omnivores, clearly opportunistic and take whatever comes along, and another good indication that you probably need to have sort of multiple rods rigged with multiple lures ready to go.
Yeah, a seahorse lure if anyone makes
one. A seahorse or a turtle skull lure if anyone wants to invent one of those. Yeah. That might open up a whole new world of tripletail fishing. So very good. Hey, Ryan, it has been absolutely fabulous having another chat with you, and really, really interesting topic, really, really interesting species. Appreciate you coming on board, because a lot of people are a little bit secretive, those that are doing the tripletail fishing. I'm not sure why, because it's one of those things that, somebody does want to give it a crack. They really need to be prepared to put in a lot of time, a lot of hours, a lot of fuel to be able to find these fish. But as you've articulated really well in this interview, well worth the effort. Amazing fish, and obviously one that you can become very obsessed with.
Yeah, no dramas at all, mate. Yeah, I'm happy to share those sorts of things. Like, even when you know what you're sort of looking for and whatnot, they're still hard. They're all just K's on the water. And obviously, sacrificing days going out the reef and whatnot, they're the days you want to be doing it. So
Yep, that's right. It does give those people who are perhaps owning smaller boats, not wanting to go all the way out to the reef, it gives them an option, but it is one. But as you said, you got to be prepared to put in that time. But a
lot of time, effort, and fuel.
Yep.
In those fish.
Yep.
And a lot of heartbreak.
Yeah, comes with the territory. Mate, it's been fabulous talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on board. All the best. I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
No worries at all, Greg. Cheers, mate.
Thanks for listening to the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. For free show notes, downloads, tools and resources, please visit our website on doclures.com, or consider supporting the show by joining Team Doc Lures to receive exclusive members-only episodes, tools and resources. But for now, tight lines, and may the fish be with you.